they welcome the U.S. role as a stabilizing force both in Asia and globally. So when you start at the top, both sides are looking at a positive relationship with the other. Now there are a number of specific things, and this was borne out in the Sunnylands meeting when President Xi Jinping was here and met with President Obama. These were unprecedented meetings. They were informal. They were very early in the tenure of both of the presidents, President Obama in his second term. They were in-depth. They were informal. They may not have been quite as informal as some suggested. You saw pictures of the two of them walking, talking. From all that I've heard, they did not talk directly. They always had interpreters. The interpreters were just cut out of the picture, right? So it's not quite as direct as you might suspect. But by all accounts, it was unusual and valuable. In addition, shortly thereafter, there was the SNED, the Security and Economic Dialogue, which is the major way in which the two governments interact. Those meetings are held annually. They bring together an enormous number of officials on both sides. I mean, like 100 or so. These were, and there were some specifics there. One is that the two sides agreed to pursue a bilateral investment treaty, which is seen as a very big step, particularly for Chinese investment in the U.S. and further U.S. investment in China. The SNED was preceded by the first cyber talks between the two sides. And Secretary Albright mentioned, and I think we all know, this issue of cyber relations and cyber issues is a very sensitive, a very difficult one. And I have heard, again, from people in Washington that these talks were actually quite constructive. And they really laid the basis for perhaps some agreements between the two sides on how to handle cyber activity on both sides. I will mention later on that it seems to me this is still an area which can be very troublesome. It's not just for U.S.-China relations. It's going to be troublesome for relations between all countries because it's a brand new area and extraordinarily difficult to conceptualize and try to control. But anyway, the talks apparently were useful, and that's a good start. On the economic front, hopeful, I think, is that the third plenum of the 18th Party Congress, plenum meaning a large-scale meeting, is going to take place in November. And the word is that there will be significant economic reforms undertaken by the new administration. In particular, Li Keqiang, the new premier, is an economist himself. And this is welcome news, I think, for U.S.-China relations, because the U.S. business community would like to see the reform process deepen and continue, and this is what apparently is going to happen. And so this is, again, as I say, is another in this list of what I see as positive, specific positive indicators in recent months. And lastly, I'd say on the military-to-military side, we've seen some hopeful signs. This, again, has been one of the most controversial issues. It's probably been the area in the bilateral relationship which is least well developed. But in recent months, there have been high-level visits both ways. It was mentioned here that we've invited China to participate in the RIMPAC exercise, which is one of the RIMPAC, meaning the rim of the Pacific. So I think that on the military side, there has been considerable progress in the two sides understanding each other. This is no magic bullet. In fact, one could make a case, I've heard it made, that the more the two sides know about each other, the more frightened they get. In particular, I can see this, to be frank, on the Chinese side. I mean, we have the biggest, most powerful, most sophisticated military establishment in the world. And if they find out more about it, they might not be reassured. They might be scared. Nevertheless, I think greater transparency and greater interaction is a worthwhile goal, and it seems to be progressing. So those, it seems to me, are the kind of positive things that we've seen in recent months. Again, there are no definite guarantee that things will be better, but I think it's not too far a stretch to see these as positive aspects that will develop. There are, however, as you all know, a number of concerns. I'm not going to go through them in the detail you can talk, but let me just mention some of the continuing concerns about U.S.-China relations that can hinder the kind of positive progress that I've just sketched out. And interestingly, many of these are the flip sides of what I've just mentioned as the positive things. This is the tricky part. This idea that the strategic statements by the leaders are positive about what each side hopes from the other side is undercut by a good deal of continuing suspicion on both sides about what the other side is up to, or what the other side might be up to in the long term. This is usually called strategic mistrust. Strategic meaning, what are the ultimate intentions? Focused now on intentions in Asia, mainly, of the United States and of China. Now, again, the leadership says that we want a positive kind of thing, but there are large swaths of public opinion in both the U.S. and in China who are much more skeptical of the future. I think, again, Evelyn Albright referred to this, and I think all of you are probably familiar. On the Chinese side, many Chinese believe that the U.S. is trying to contain, to undercut, to hinder its growth, because it sees it as a competitor. And so for those who are deeply imbued with this point of view, everything the U.S. does is really designed to undercut China's progress. Things that, and this is where it's difficult, we don't see it all in this perspective. For instance, support for Taiwan. Now, we see support for Taiwan as a long-term historical issue. We support Taiwan in part because of the way their politics have developed, although it started well before they were democratic. But some in China, the more extreme, say the main reason we support Taiwan is to divert resources on China from other things, and therefore help to undercut them. Promotion of democracy, human rights. Some in China who are suspicious of the U.S. see this as a tactic to undercut and make more difficult life in China. This is one where I feel strongly about, and I think everyone here can appreciate. Support for human rights is not the tactic of the U.S. Support for democracy is not the tactic. It's about as deep in our DNA as you can get in our culture, in our civilization. We believe in it, and will continue to. And this will continue to be, in my view, and Secretary Albright mentioned this, one of the very difficult issues between ourselves and China. And to be honest, because our systems are so different and the bases are so different, I don't think we're ever going to get great progress on this. We're not going to make progress, I don't think, in convincing China to change their mind. I don't think they're going to make much progress in convincing us to change our mind. So this is one that's got to be, when you've got a fundamental difference, you have to try to manage it rather than harbor what I think are unrealistic hopes that it will be resolved somehow. You continue to hold to your position, you make your points, but you have to realize that the chances that you're going to fundamentally change their point of view, you have to be realistic.